what sort of design, player experience, etc. did you have, Dave?
Yeah, so with gameplay, so like I mentioned previously, the combat was definitely a stronger point for Wuthering Waves in terms of the character abilities and being very flashy and like I said, working in perfect dodges and counterattacks and the timing on those, and then building up your typical energy to use your ultimate or building up other energy to then combo in with like your character's outro skill with the next character's intro skill and stuff like that. So the combat is very good. As far as the mechanics, so the equivalent to artifacts are going to be the echoes, and these echoes basically randomly drop from creatures in the overworld, and they essentially are the creatures in the overworld, as it were. So if you kill this bear, it has a chance of turning into an echo you can absorb, and then that echo can be attached to a character as if it's a piece of equipment, which will give your substats and your set bonuses and whatever have you, and then you can have one of those echoes be your Q ability or just another ability, and each not Pokemon has a different ability based off of whenever you call them out. For instance, there's one where you'll turn into a golem and do a charge attack. There's another one where you'll turn into a turtle and do a dance that heals you, and then maybe do a spike shell attack. Another one will be like a plant that'll shoot like a laser beam at something like that. And so that's just like an additional skill to help add some customization, as it were, to your character abilities, which is an interesting concept. My gripe with the ecosystem is you never know when one's gonna drop. You can't guarantee an echo to drop like you could in an artifact dungeon, where you're guaranteed you don't necessarily know if it's gonna be a purple artifact or an orange artifact. You're at least going to get an artifact. I could go kill monsters, and there's no guarantee I'm going to get an artifact or get an echo, which is a little bit annoying. And then, of course, you still have the same typical substat RNG that has come to be associated with a lot of these types of equipment systems. So you have your eight, nine, 10 different stats it could roll into, and only four of them are useless, or only four of them are maybe useful. So they didn't really do anything, you know, to renovate that system and make it interesting. And then again, I think the farming aspect made it worse because you can't guarantee a drop. And even if you could guarantee a drop, they literally can range anywhere from the typical rainbow of rarity in RPGs being green, blue, purple, orange, right?
Hmm.
So your commons, uncommons, rares, legendaries. Like you can't guarantee necessarily a legendary drop from the overworld type thing. At least that I've seen. If I'm wrong or if they change that, please let me know down below because I would like some help with that.
I
And then
think
another thing I'm
it's tied to world level. I
and
think.
potentially that might be it, but to that point, we're not at a higher world level yet, so I'm not getting too many to even drop at all. So that maybe speaks to the rarity, but the frequency of the drops. I don't know if it speaks to the frequency of the drop. Another thing I have an issue with, a small issue with, and I don't know if this is something that Genshin did. My memory that they may have been at fault, maybe guilty of this as well, and that's in terms of like, to level up weapons or to level up characters. Getting to World 2, I couldn't ascend my characters beyond level 20 until I advanced the world to World 2, and then I could get them to 40 or whatever. But then materials that I would need to get them to 40, I couldn't farm in World 1. I had to be in World 2. That's already upped the character or the enemy difficulty, excuse me. So I'd like to see maybe it doesn't have to be as efficient, right? It could be a less efficient way, but I'd still like to be able to pre-farm those materials that you need to get to say level 60. I'd like to be able to farm those in the level 40 worlds. Again, even if it's a less efficient way than if you were to be in the level 60 world, if that makes sense. And I can't remember if Genshin did that in
So
any
I can
or not.
answer that question if you would like.
Yeah.
So the way that Genshin and at least Honkai handle it is there are situations where you will not be able to get the materials that you need in order to ascend until you already have hit the necessary world level. An example of that would be things like certain world bosses, certain boss mats and so on and so forth that you just
Mhm.
won't be able to unlock that until you're a higher level. However, that tends to be at a low level and more story gated. Things like talent materials, ascension materials, etc., that are not boss drops, you can typically get them in less efficient forms. Just as a peek behind the curtain, that's part of the reason why I jumped in here. As we show ongoing gameplay behind us, eagle eyed viewers will notice that I do not raise the world level in the Brohoyo account above, I think, world level 5, primarily because I was trying to beeline the story and I knew that raise the world level, everything would jump up in difficulty and I'd have to stop to grind in order to get all the characters caught up, in order to then
Mm.
be able to continue with the content. So I actually played through at a lower world level in order to, or a lower equilibrium level in order to be able to finish the story in a reasonable time period and not have to lose a weekend grinding out mats in order to level up my characters to then be able to continue with the story. I just went, screw it, it's not worth it. I know I'm getting lesser rewards. I understand that every time I open a chest, that's an opportunity cost that happened. I don't care. I was just trying to get to the end of it.
And
Jumping ahead
that's
of
good
that.
clarification. Yeah. No, thank you for that. And like I said, it's something that I preface said Genshin may have been guilty of this, and it sounds like that they are to a little bit of an extent. So yeah, so that would be a gripe for both. But again, we're just talking about Wuthering Waves because that's what just launched. And then as far as the overworld exploration stuff, it is a little bit easier. It's nice not having to worry about stamina when you're just running and only having to worry about it when you're swimming or when you're running up a wall, which again is much faster than climbing up a wall.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of the overworld challenges just maybe feel a little bit clunkier in terms of race from point A to point B without touching the ground, but you don't necessarily have a path laid out for you or directional arrows on where to go. You just have to hope that your eye catches like where the little glowing orbs are, or maybe some of the speed challenges and racing around aren't as intuitive as maybe you would like them to be. And then another thing too with exploration is if you're going to have world levels, I think there's a moment in our Let's Play where I was doing that. I was just running around exploring, just trying to unlock the fast travel points and just exploring what I can explore. And I'm like, oh hey, what's the worst that could happen? And then I ran into some level 60 or 70 mobs, and I'm sitting there level 20, and I'm on world one, and yeah, those are eventually going to become trivial enemies to beat once I'm high enough level. But if you have a world difficulty level, you're not expecting to run into level 60 or 70 things just willy nilly out of the blue. Pick a lane and go with it. Either have zones that have different levels or have a world that has different levels. Don't try and combine both because then that blocks me out from getting to that area or exploring that area as thoroughly as maybe I would like to. But again, I think going back to the combat, which is what you're going to spend a majority of the time doing, especially as we get into the farming stages and the grinding out for materials. I think that's a strong point for the game itself. I think that and the intricacies and like the perfect dodges and stuff is something that's going to keep people around to try and perfect that and get better and improve at it. And then also depending on what mechanics they introduce with characters that are going to be coming out down the road. But Stevie, I'll throw it back to you. Any complaints that you have with the game or praises that you have in terms of the gameplay aspects?
Yeah, again, combat great. I know that we keep on beating that drum, but that very much so is the selling point of the game. I agree with you about most of the world activities that they either feel clunky or I would even say a lot of them are basic to the point of appealing. There's really just not a lot driving me to do them. Not that Genshin is, again, not guilty of this. They have a number of overworld puzzles and events and so on and so forth that are just only interesting because I need to do them in order to get the chest so that I can make the fountain go up or make the tree go up or whatever. Get those seals. Other than that, meh, I'd probably not even bother with them most of the time. Yeah, I really do feel that playing the game, they would have been better off not going the open world route. I would also say that from the mechanics point of view, I really agree with you to a certain amount that the leveling system and the world level system and so on and so forth just don't appeal. They're not systems that I necessarily enjoy in Genshin, and having to play through them again here is not one that I'm chomping at the bit to go through a second or third time, as it were. We'll see when ZZZ comes out if that same system is in place and what goes on there, because I'm going to be honest, going through it a fourth time at this point, fifth time at this point, is rather unappealing. And I understand that there needs to be progression. We did an entire episode on progression, but I really do feel that the way that it's set up is not intuitive. It's not something that I'm really enjoying. I would also say that the fact that you can't teleport directly to a boss,
Yeah, I
or
was
that
just
they
about to
don't,
say that. Yeah.
yeah, that they don't have teleporters that are in many cases just outside. There are some cases where you can teleport to like right next to one and you'll be okay, but there are some that are off in the middle of nowhere. There's no teleporter near it, and you're just left going like, okay, I guess if I want to grind this boss, it's going to be a 2 minute run in order to get over. The fight lasts maybe 5 minutes, maybe less, depending on level and so on and so forth. And then I've got to leave, waste 5 minutes, and then I get to come back, but I have to. There's then a 2 minute delay on teleporting back and getting there. So that's an issue. I would also say the fact that teleporters don't heal is mildly annoying, that you have to go to the beacon in order to heal yourself instead of having both the little teleporters and the beacons heal you. It is a minor frustration. I would also say that some of the boss arenas are frustrating. One of the issues that I had the first and second day was I was trying to fight a one of the bosses in order to get the mats and clear the achievement and so on and so forth. And I would get the boss down to maybe a third of his health, and he would reset. And I'd be sitting there going, like, great, I'm now at half health on all my characters, or I might have a character downed, and I could finish the fight. I could win the fight, but that's dependent on the character not, or the boss not rubber banding and then resetting itself to full health and immediately dropping me back in at my current resource level. That was frustrating. I haven't run into that issue as much. Now that we're a little bit further in, they might have fixed that and resolved some of those arena issues to where the bosses aren't quite as reset happy. They're not quite as bound to their arena, so you have a little bit of wiggle room. But as long as I am within the area of the arena, I don't feel like the boss should reset, even if I am successfully kiting the boss and not taking any damage or allowing it to hit me. I
So
feel like that's good play.
you mentioned the moss resetting, so I haven't had that, but I've had the opposite in that the battle has waged and beyond kind of what I would feel the arena would be, so much to the point that the arena is not isolated. I've been fighting a boss for the ascension materials, and then three random mobs that were at camps nearby aggro. And so now instead of fighting this fast moving, flying around boss and trying to focus on when I can counterattack him and dodging the ranged attacks when he's blinking everywhere, now I have these three other level 46 mobs when I'm level 40 trying to attack me and get at me. And they don't, honorably wait their turn for a one-on-one duel.
Mm-hmm.
They're all just coming at me. And that is an issue that I've not really experienced in any other game before, where if you're farming a boss, just random world mobs that are like little creeps come in. That's something that I think could afford to be fixed, or afford to put like an invisible wall or barrier so that the boss doesn't go outside it, and therefore the player doesn't go outside it to aggro these other mobs.
Yeah, again, that kind of just, I've had that happen to me as well. But that kind of goes back to my issue that I feel like as an open world game, it just doesn't. The combat system and the open world systems don't play well together. That you want to be playing in open arenas without a lot of difficult geometry. You want to play it in the MOC or in the Abyss type arenas. You don't necessarily want big logs sitting in the middle of the battlefield that your characters get caught up on, or you're trying to dodge and then you move an inch and then you're hitting a rock and great, I'm stuck here, or what have you. That it really does feel that it wants to be played in empty arenas where that cut and thrust of the combat can really play out well, and doing that in the open world just doesn't add anything to it. But maybe I'm just being a doomer on it. Maybe I'm being overly critical, and that open world aspect is more interesting. There's something going on that I'm not seeing. If there was more terrain obstacles or so forth that you could interact with as part of combat, maybe that would help it. I've also had an issue where I knocked a low level mob off of a cliff and they fell, and basically the only thing I could do is wait for it to rubber band and teleport back up to the top and reset itself instead of it dying. I knocked it off the cliff. It fell 50 feet. Maybe it should take fall damage and die. If I had fallen from that height, I would have died, but apparently the mobs, it doesn't work that way, and so that can be a little bit frustrating. Yeah, again, the movement in the open world is great. The ability to run up the walls, the hook shot that you get, your grappling hook, works really well in order to get an extra boost, and using it in combat is fun, and so on and so forth. It's just, again, I don't necessarily feel that the pieces were put together well. It seems like you really had a combat team and then an open world team, and the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing, and they weren't really working together to make something that flows together in the same way that, as just a sort of general example, in Genshin, you can set the grass on fire, and that creates pyro. If you're standing in water, hydro is going to get applied. If you're standing in water and you use electro, hey, you've just electrified the water, electrocuted. If you're standing in water and somebody uses cryo, you get frozen. Stuff like that. There's interactions with the world that make combat and exploration merge. And there's not that same effect in Wuthering Waves, or at least I'm not seeing it.
The only warmth remains in hands clasped so tight. The only fire exists in brave hearts.